My house was built in 1904. It is a single-family home, wood frame setting and a concrete block foundation. I've been living here for about 12 years. Of all the weird things that my siblings and I have seen or heard in this house, this one event is my favorite. This happened to my brother. About 10 years ago, my brother and his best friends had started a garage band playing mostly Spanish rock, alternative music but in Spanish. His friends could only get together on Sunday afternoons. They would practice into the early evening, and they would usually call it quits by 8 p.m. This was the time I usually showed up and went to bed, cause I worked the graveyard shift. This happened in late fall, so the days were getting shorter. They had just finished a long session when the decision to head to someone else's house came about. My brother handed his car keys to his buddies so they could load up the equipment. Everyone had filed out the basement, but the tricky part was that they needed to walk all the way to the back of the basement, up the back stairs, through the kitchen doorway, down the hall into the living room, and out into the front porch. Everyone was outside sitting in my brother's truck waiting for him. My brother was walking up the back stairs when he remembered that he left his pancakes in a to-go container sitting on a speaker in the basement. He made the decision to go back. Now, the basement is not clean, with full sight lines. There had been partitions made, and the boiler and main heating unit are right smack in the middle. So after my brother walks back, he's about to retrieve his food container, when out of the corner of his eye he sees it. It is a shadowy figure, right at his peripheral vision. This feeling of dread and uneasiness washed over my brother. We had been taught that if you are in the presence of a spirit or ghost that you feel a bad vibe, to say quick prayer or to cuss at it. My brother chose the latter. He basically just told it, "Hey, fuck you. I don't have time for this shit." My brother started to walk to the back of the basement and briskly up the stairs, closing doors and turning off lights as he was walking out. The last light switch on the opposite side of the front door, luckily the door was open, and the light from the street lamp was flooding the living room with its amber light. My brother said he felt something at his back, but at no point did he turn around. As he flicked the last switch, the living room went dark, as did the rest of the house. As he stepped out, he pulled on the door, closing it behind him. Still holding his food container in one hand, he jogged down the few porch steps. He walked towards the front gate. Our house resides far from the main street, essentially having a large front yard but no rear garage. As he closed the gap between himself and his friend-laden truck, he kind of smiled and thought things over in his head. Mad at himself for spooking out when there was no reason. He climbed into the driver's side of the truck, putting on his seatbelt and getting ready to pull out of the parking spot directly in front of the house, when one of his friends asked, "Hey, wait, what about your brother? Isn't he coming with us?" My brother answered, "What do you mean? He went to work early tonight. He's already gone. Do you see his car anywhere?" The next question they asked, "So then, who was walking behind you when you were leaving the house?" So in February of 2015, my then girlfriend and I were staying at her place, doing teenage things like smoking weed, which didn't alter the events that happened, and staying up late. When 11 came around, we were full-blown making out when her mini fridge opened and closed fast and loud, which freaked us out, but she said it happens a lot. Then her closet light blew out, then turned back on after a few minutes, which scared her, so we stopped our activities. An hour later, we're back at it again when I hear something fall off her mini fridge. When I go to investigate, I see the word "stop" written in the magnet letters when it originally said "shit," with all the other letters on the ground because we thought we were edgy, so I'm kinda freaked out. But I don't want to let her know, so I tell her it was nothing and lay back down. Then at 1:30 we were about to fall asleep when I hear something from the closet say, "Hey, what are you doing?" I'm officially freaked out now. and we leave from my house, which is a 20-minute drive, and stay there. I wake up around noon to a note saying she left, and was breaking up with me because she needed space. This was weird because it was a 20-minute drive and she apparently walked home, but I thought maybe she had her mom or something pick her up. The only reason I'm sharing this inconvenient story is because I hadn't seen her until a few days ago, and she didn't recognize me, but I knew it was her. She was pale and skinny compared to 3 years ago. I don't know what happened to her, or if I should do something. Last night I had trouble sleeping. I'd gotten home late after going to my brother's house and was watching Netflix to try and make me go to sleep. I was awake until about 2:30 in the morning. Finally, I felt my eyes closing and I fell asleep. I should mention I live in an apartment. My dad's room is visible from my bedroom door, which my bed is right next to, so I have a good view of my dad's bedroom. My dad works nights, so it was just me and my little brother in that room. I woke up in my bed at somewhere around 3 or 3:30, laying face down in my bed. I feel the thirst for water burn my mouth, so I try to reach for my water bottle. But there's a problem. I can't move. I think, oh well, it's just sleep paralysis. The situations seem like what happened to people when they experience sleep paralysis. I watched a documentary about it once, so I remained calm and waited for it to pass. But then I start to hear this noise. It sounded like TV static, mixed with when you put two walkie-talkies next to each other. It started out faint, but gradually it got louder and louder. So loud I had to reach with my hands to cover my head. It took a lot of strength to reach up and cover my ears. But the noise only got louder. I realized it was coming from my head. I thought over and over that it was going to go away, and that it was just a hallucination. But it didn't. Louder and louder. I felt something. A stare. Coming from my dad's room. I strained to flip myself over onto my back as the noise became deafening. My blood turned ice cold when I saw it. There I saw a tall black figure, with an unhumanly large grin, and shining eyes. It began to approach me. The noise, it was too much. The figure entered my room. It was so large it had to duck to fit under the door frame. I couldn't believe it. It had to be fake. It had to be sleep paralysis. But why could I move? Why was this noise in my head? I was so confused. The figure tilted its head as it looked down at me. I wanted to scream, but I couldn't. I felt something. It was my throat. It was getting harder to breathe. I felt something crushing my throat as I tried to let out a scream, but nothing. The grip tightened around my throat as the creature stood there, still smiling. My life literally flashed before my eyes. I thought this was it. This is how I die. I thought about my brother and my father, and all the good memories we shared. I even thought about my mother, who died a few years back. Everything started to fade. I felt tears rolling down my face. Then suddenly everything faded. I woke up startled and I jumped out of bed to see my brother on his phone. I ran over to him and hugged him. He was confused. I just told him I thought I'd never see him again. I was so glad it wasn't real. As real as it felt. My thoughts were interrupted by my brother staring at me in a confused way. He pointed at my neck. He said, "What's that mark on your neck?" My eyes opened wide as I tried to find something to say. I ran to the bathroom. There on my neck were 5 bright red finger marks. And not normal-sized marks either. The fingers were 5 to 6 inches long and stretched all the way around my neck. I wanted to melt into a puddle. It's currently the night after this happened. I can't sleep. I don't know if I will ever be able to. So this happened to my husband and I when we were both 20. After celebrating our 2-year anniversary, we came home late one night around 2 a.m. We still had some more plans, so I told my husband to go in and put his gun upstairs on the bed. So he got out of the car and went in. After about 5 minutes, he comes running out the door and jumps in the car out of breath. What he told me still makes chills go down my back. He said after he walked in, he just had a very bad feeling. Nothing he could explain. He said he was honestly just terrified, so he slowly walked upstairs and went to his bed. The way our upstairs works is once you get to the top stairs, there is a bed and another door right next to it that leads into another room. So he laid the gun down and looked at the door, and out of nowhere the door slowly opens and he sees a shadow. So he told me that he sprinted down the stairs and stood in the door. Though he heard nothing, he saw black boots walking down the stairs, and as he saw this, he ran out the front door. Just letting you know, we locked both the front and back doors, so there was no evidence of a break-in. Of course, me being a skeptic, I didn't believe him. So he begged me to drive away from the house, but after a few moments, we never saw anyone leave. I was kinda creeped out at this point, but wanted to prove that there was nothing up there. So I walked up the driveway and opened the front door. And I shit you not, it was way too quiet. So I walked halfway up the stairs, and what I heard next still haunts me to this day. Just as a heads up, we were still in the middle of moving, so the only thing that was in the room was a ton of boxes. So as I'm nearing the top, all hell breaks loose. I hear boxes and papers flying all over, and vases breaking over and over again. So after about 5 minutes of this, I slowly open the door after the noise stops completely. And all I saw was one fucking box tipped over with a few papers spilling out. Honestly, I freaked out and ran out of the house as fast as I could. I jumped into the car and drove off, and I told my husband what just happened, and by the look on his face, I could tell he believed me. So after a few hours, we returned home, still shooken up pretty bad. And we were walking up the sidewalk, and I looked up to the attic window and saw the outline of a man. Sure enough, we moved a week later. First off, this isn't my story, but a story my mother used to tell me. On a summer's day, my mother and her 3 sisters were running around outside playing in the yard. My grandfather was outside watering the plants. It was just before sundown in our little piece of the desert. A stranger had walked up and started talking to my grandfather, asking simple questions and just talking about life. My grandfather had talked for maybe 30 minutes, before my grandmother had told my mother to get her dad and let him know dinner was ready. Being a child, my mother ran outside to where her dad had been talking with this strange man. She was raised to not interrupt the adults as they were talking. As she was waiting for her dad to acknowledge her, she was looking at this man talking to her father. She noticed that the man wasn't standing on his feet, but was simply floating about a foot off the ground. She started pulling at her father's arm, not able to speak, just staring hard pointed towards the ground where this man's feet should have been. Her father finally acknowledged her and told her to not be rude, as he looked in the direction she was pointing. He also noticed this man was not standing on the ground but was floating. He quickly picked her up and shouted for my grandmother, who was still in the house cooking. He was yelling for her to make sure the other girls were inside. Before he could turn to leave the man he had been talking to, the man called him by his full name and told him it's okay, that it wasn't his time. He then vanished before he could even ask him how he knew his name.